At 33.41 degrees north, 35.85 degrees east, Mount Hermon rises 9,232 feet above sea level on the border of modern Syria and Lebanon. A United Nations buffer zone has restricted civilian access to its summit since 1974. The Book of Enoch names this exact peak, not a region, not a range, this peak, as the place where 200 watchers descended and made an oath together. They came down, and they left nothing behind except what they taught. In 363 AD, at the Council of Laodicea, a decision was made. The Book of Enoch was removed, excluded, declared non-canonical. Church leadership did not destroy every copy, but they ensured it would not travel with the accepted scriptures. For over 1,000 years, it circulated only in fragments, in whispers, in languages most scholars did not read. Then, 3 complete manuscripts surfaced. Not partial scrolls, not damaged fragments. 3 full Ge'ez manuscripts, preserved inside Ethiopian Orthodox churches, intact. The survival of those 3 documents changed what we are able to say about this text, because you cannot dismiss what you can fully read. What those manuscripts describe is not allegory, not metaphor, not a fever dream recorded by an ancient mystic. The Book of Enoch catalogs specific supernatural beings, names them individually, and assigns to each one a precise domain of forbidden knowledge they transmitted to human beings. Metallurgy, celestial navigation, pharmaceutical compounds, cosmetic arts. Each item named, each teacher named. That catalog maps point by point onto the foundational technologies of modern civilization. Not loosely, not poetically, precisely. In the next several minutes, you will see what the original Ge'ez text actually says, what the historical and scientific record confirms at each entry, and why the implications of that match have never been addressed in mainstream scholarship. If suppressed biblical history is the territory you want to keep exploring, subscribe now. Every week, we go deeper into what was removed and why it was removed before most people could read it. The primary manuscript is Codex Kebra Nagast adjacent, but for the Book of Enoch specifically, the authoritative source is the Ge'ez text held at the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, translated definitively by Dr. Michael Knibb of King's College London, whose 1978 Oxford University Press edition remains the standard academic reference. The passage in question comes from the 8th chapter of 1st Enoch, 1st verse. Knibb renders it directly. Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. Read that again slowly. Not tools, not farming implements, not construction materials. The Ge'ez term used is harb. That word does not mean instrument. It does not mean object. Harb means specifically an instrument of killing, a weapon designated for taking human life. The text is not ambiguous. The translator is not interpreting loosely. Azazel's first transmission to mankind was a weapons curriculum. Now, consider the timeline the text is working within. This account is set before the flood. Pre-Diluvian civilization by any archaeological framework should not have possessed sophisticated metallurgical knowledge for forging edged weapons. The smelting of iron requires sustained temperatures above 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. It requires knowledge of ore selection, carbon content, quenching technique, and blade geometry. These are not skills arrived at casually. They represent an enormous accumulation of trial, error, and transmitted expertise across generations. Expertise that, according to the standard archaeological model, did not exist at the point this text describes. He had no framework from which to derive it. No prior civilization handed it down. Yet Enoch records it as a transmission event, a specific being with a specific name delivering a specific body of knowledge to human recipients. That is not the structure of myth. That is the structure of a technical record. And the modern match is not subtle. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute published its 2023 Global Military Expenditure Report. The confirmed figure? $2.2 trillion spent on weapons and weapon systems in a single calendar year. That number represents the output of an entire planetary industry. Design, metallurgy, manufacturing, deployment, built entirely around the production of instruments designated for killing. Swords scaled to cruise missiles. Knives scaled to precision-guided munitions. Shields scaled to reactive armor systems. Breastplates scaled to ballistic protection rated to stop rounds traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The catalog Azazel delivered, swords, knives, shields, breastplates, is not a primitive list that civilization outgrew. It is the seed taxonomy of the modern military-industrial complex. Every weapons category active on Earth today traces its functional lineage back to those 4 items. Edged weapons became firearms, became guided ordnance. Shields became armor, became electronic countermeasure systems. The names changed. The engineering scaled. The underlying purpose, the harb, the instrument of killing, never changed at all. Dr. Nibb's 1978 translation does not frame this as metaphor. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which has guarded this text for centuries while Western canons excluded it, does not treat it as allegory. The text presents Azazel as a source, a teacher, an origin point for a specific domain of human knowledge that has since grown into the largest single expenditure category in the history of organized civilization. $2.2 trillion. 1 year, 1 planet, 1 catalog that began on a mountain with restricted access at 33.41 degrees north. And this is where it gets disturbing, because the list Azazel delivered does not end with weapons. There is a manuscript leaf held in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, catalogued under Ethiopian 32, translated by the scholar R. H. Charles in 1906, and later cross-referenced against the Dead Sea fragments housed at the Israel Antiquities Authority in Jerusalem. The passage in question names 2 figures, Barakajal and Kokabel, and what they transferred to humanity is still being used tonight, at observatories on 6 continents. The Ge'ez text uses a specific word for what Kokabel taught, Menazert. It does not translate simply as stars. The literal construction means the watchers of the sky, a compound that carries both the act of observation and the objects being tracked. Star signs, positional markers, a system of celestial mapping that assumes the sky is divided, categorized, and readable. That is not folklore. That is technical curriculum. Barakajal's contribution sits directly alongside it. Astrology in the original sense, not the newspaper column version, but the foundational framework that linked sky positions to earthly events, seasons, agricultural timing, and navigational bearing. The text presents both men as instructors, not visionaries, not priests interpreting dreams. Instructors delivering a structured body of knowledge to students who had no prior framework to receive it. Here is where the record becomes difficult to explain away. Mesopotamian star catalogs appear in the archaeological record beginning around 3000 BC. The Mul-Apen tablets, held at the British Museum under cuneiform collection, reference BM 86378, contain a fully systematized map of the night sky, constellations named, rising and setting times calculated, planetary paths tracked across the ecliptic. Scholars date the observational data embedded in those tablets to significantly earlier than their physical inscription. The knowledge inside them is older than the clay they were pressed into. There is no precursor culture, no fragmentary earlier attempt, no series of progressively improving drafts showing trial and error development. The system arrives complete.
Dr. Willie Hartner, writing in the Journal for the History of Astronomy in 1965, noted that the constellation boundaries preserved in Babylonian astronomy show a coherence that implies a single founding act of organization, rather than accumulated folk observation. His words, "A coherence that implies a single founding act." He was not referencing the Book of Enoch, he was reading the data. Modern astronomy operates with exactly 88 officially recognized constellations. That number was formally standardized by the International Astronomical Union in 1930. But the boundaries those 88 constellations follow trace directly to Babylonian star maps. The IAU did not invent the grid, they ratified it. The original design, the division of the sky into named, bounded sectors with calculable positions, is the same design that appears in the Mulopin tablets, which embed data older than the tablets themselves. The ancient sky watchers and the modern observatory are working from the same inherited map. Kokobel's curriculum did not decay. It was copied, translated, transmitted through Greek astronomy, absorbed into Arabic star naming conventions, which is why most of the 88 constellation stars still carry Arabic names today, and delivered intact into the software running inside every planetarium projector on the planet. The Ge'ez word manazert carries one additional layer: watchers. The word used for the beings who descended also describes the act of observation they taught. They were watchers who taught watching. The sky was the first classroom, and the lesson has never ended. But the text doesn't stop at the heavens, because the next entry in the catalog moves from the sky down to the ground, and into the body itself. The earliest complete manuscript of 1st Enoch in Ge'ez sits in the British Library, catalogued as Oriental 485, acquired in 1844, and translated by Dr. Michael Knibb in his 1978 Oxford edition, which remains the standard scholarly reference. A parallel fragment, designated 4Q201, was recovered from Qumran Cave 4 and is currently held by the Israel Antiquities Authority. Both texts record the same transfer of knowledge. The Watchers taught sorcery, enchantments, and root cutting. That last term is the one that matters. The Ge'ez carries the phrase that translates most precisely as the cutting of roots, a technical description, not a metaphor. It refers to the extraction of active compounds from plant material, the identification of which roots, which parts, which preparation methods, which dosages produce which effects in the human body. This is not witchcraft in the theatrical sense. This is pharmacology. And the word that eventually names the entire global industry descends directly from this act, the Greek pharmakia. It comes from pharmakon, which meant both remedy and poison, depending on the dose. The root cutters of the ancient world were the first pharmacists. The word pharmacy is etymologically inseparable from the practice the Watchers introduced. That is not a metaphor. That is a word history traceable through documented linguistic descent. Now, consider what root cutting actually requires. To know that a specific alkaloid compound in a plant binds to a receptor in the human nervous system, you need knowledge of both the plant's chemistry and the body's receptor architecture. To know that willow bark contains salicin, which the liver converts to salicylic acid, which reduces inflammation, that is a multi-step biochemical pathway. Pre-modern herbalists observed effects, but the systematic identification of active compounds, dosage thresholds, and mechanism of action is not something that accumulates through casual observation. It requires either centuries of controlled trial and error documentation, or it requires the knowledge to be delivered. The text says it was delivered. And the global industry built on that delivery is now valued at $1.48 trillion. That figure comes from the IQVIA Institute for Human Data Science, reporting on 2022 global pharmaceutical market revenue. $1.48 trillion in a single calendar year. The entire infrastructure, the synthesis labs,
the clinical trial frameworks, the molecular modeling software, the regulatory bodies, rest on the foundational act of knowing which compounds from which plants do what inside a human body. The root cutters of Mount Hermon and the research chemists of Pfizer, Roche, and Novartis are working in the same lineage. The tools have changed. The underlying project has not. What makes this harder to dismiss is the timeline. Knowledge of specific plant alkaloids, their extraction, their concentration, their physiological effects, appears in ancient records without a documented development phase. The Ebers Papyrus, dated to approximately 1550 BC, and housed at the University of Leipzig, catalogs over 700 plant-based remedies with specific preparation instructions. No earlier Egyptian document shows the experimental progression that would produce that catalog. It arrives fully formed. The same pattern that appeared in the star maps appears in the pharmacopoeia. Completeness without precedent. But here is what makes this stranger. Because the very next entry in the catalog applies the same logic to something most people never think to question: the way human beings choose to appear. The Ge'ez manuscript, designated Ethiopian 32, held at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, and cross-referenced against the Qumran fragment 4Q206, currently housed at the Israel Antiquities Authority, contains a passage that Dr. Michael Knibb's 1978 Oxford translation renders with precise material specificity. Azazel, the same figure already linked to metallurgy and weapons, taught the use of antimony, precious stones, colored dyes, and the ornamentation of the human body. This is not a general reference to vanity. The text names a substance. The Ge'ez uses the term coal. It refers specifically to antimony sulfide, a compound produced by heating the mineral stibnite, collecting the sublimated powder, and grinding it to a fine consistency suitable for application around the eyes. This is a metallurgical process. It requires knowledge of ore identification, controlled heating temperatures, sublimation chemistry, and the understanding that the resulting compound is stable, adherent, and safe at cosmetic concentrations. The word coal has persisted intact from the ancient world into the present. It is still sold in that precise formulation across 142 countries today. Here is the impossible knowledge problem. No Bronze Age culture shows an independent developmental record for cosmetic metallurgy. There is no archaeological sequence of progressively refined attempts to isolate antimony sulfide from raw stibnite for decorative use. The process appears in the record the same way the star maps appeared and the pharmacopoeia appeared: complete, functional, and without a visible learning curve. Egyptian cosmetic containers recovered from pre-dynastic sites, now held at the Cairo Museum and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, contain antimony sulfide residue dating to before 3100 BC. The chemistry is correct from the first recovered sample. Azazel's curriculum did not require refinement. It arrived finished. The industry that descends from that curriculum is now the largest personal expenditure category outside of food and housing for the average consumer in 37 countries. Global beauty industry revenue is projected to reach $625 billion in 2025. That figure comes from Statista's 2023 Global Beauty and Personal Care Market Report. $625 billion. Sourced from the same foundational act, the knowledge that specific minerals, pigments, and compounds, applied to the human body in specific ways, produce specific aesthetic effects. The cosmetic chemists formulating products in laboratories in Paris, Seoul, and New York are operating in the direct lineage of a curriculum the text says was delivered on a mountain in the northern Levant before recorded history begins. And the Ge'ez text does not treat this transfer as neutral. The passage frames the teaching of ornamentation alongside the teaching of weapons and root cutting as a coordinated act of corruption, not of the body, but of the human relationship to the body. The text's logic is precise. Once a being can be taught to alter their appearance, to measure their worth by material augmentation, a dependency is created. The ornament becomes the standard. The standard becomes the industry. The industry becomes the infrastructure of a civilization that no longer remembers where the knowledge came from. $625 billion built on a transfer that a pre-flood scribe documented by name, by substance, and by instructor. The pattern is now undeniable, and Enoch recorded exactly where it leads. 3 complete Giez manuscripts of First Enoch sit in the British Museum today, catalogued, accessible. Chapters 7 and 8 are publicly readable. You can verify every name, every art, every instructor yourself. Every forbidden knowledge Enoch recorded now operates at global industrial scale. Weapons manufacturing, pharmaceutical synthesis, cosmetic chemistry, astronomical manipulation. Not echoes, active industries. The text specifies the Watchers were bound for 70 generations. Scholars place a biblical generation at 70 years. Run the count forward from the date of the descent. The number lands close, very close. The mechanism Enoch described was never dismantled. It was inherited. Which forbidden art disturbs you most? Tell us in the comments below. Subscribe. Every week we surface what was removed from the record.